Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. Dana White, the UFC president, recently launched Power Slap, and I wasn't planning on doing a video on it because I really did not want to give it any attention, but I feel like Power Slap has gotten to a place where it is a massive black eye on the UFC for more reasons than one. And, my reasoning, I believe, is going to be a lot different than I've seen some takes out there from Ariel Helwani and other big names in the MMA media landscape. And I just wanted to talk about it because I do really believe that this is detrimental to the business of the UFC. And I really think it's an embarrassment to the MMA community. So first off, starting off, what is Power Slap? I've only watched clips. I looked up a video of Dana White going over the rules of Power Slap. But essentially what it is it's two men or two women slapping each other until one is incapacitated, or there's 3 rounds. And at the end of 3 rounds, it's judged on what I believe, according to Dana White in his YouTube video on his Power Slap YouTube channel. I'll link it down in the description. It's judged based as an MMA fight, which, is just baffling to me in general. And so there's judges, there's referees. This is sanctioned by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. And basically they're running a TV show, and they're running it off the basis of The Ultimate Fighter. They're doing The Ultimate Fighter for Power Slap, essentially. And apparently, and this is something I can't even fathom. I don't even know if I can get the words out. Apparently at the end of this show, they are planning on doing a pay-per-view for Power Slap. Yes, you heard that right. Who's going to buy that pay-per-view? I don't know. In a minute, we're going to talk about whether or not I think Power Slap will last and what will be the end of it, and what can we do as consumers of the UFC product. What can we do if we don't want Power Slap to stick around? I'm kind of going against my own rules here in this video, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But Power Slap almost didn't happen because a couple weeks before Power Slap was set to debut, Dana White is getting drunk in a club in Mexico, and he smacks his wife. Yes, his wife smacked him first. At the end of the day, he smacked her back. People are going to say self-defense. I have a whole video on it. It's not self-defense, okay? He was retaliating. We can get into the morals of that or not. He shouldn't have done it. And it was a massive black stain now on the embarrassment that was Power Slap, because you're launching a slap fight promotion. And on top of that, now you're caught at 53 years old in a club in Mexico beating your wife and slapping your wife multiple times. It almost didn't happen. And I got really excited about that because I got tired of seeing the Power Slap promotion. And, I don't ever want to sit here and wish somebody's business fails. But at the same time, I was like, thank you, Dana, for doing this, even though that's horrible. Because if this is the end of Power Slap before it even got started, I could not be happier. And I've watched some videos of people talking about Power Slap, and a lot of people in the MMA media landscape, Ariel Helwani and so on and so forth, have been talking about basically it's brain damage, it's CTE, and you're not able to defend yourself. Because when you're being slapped, you are holding your hands behind your back. You have to keep your chin up high, and basically you just take the smack. And what I believe Dana White and whoever else is on board with him with this investment and trying to build this business, I think what they think is they saw a viral clip at one point. They saw a TikTok, a reel, a YouTube short. And, stuff like that gets shared around where you have these viral knockouts of these crazy slap promotions they have over in like Russia and stuff like that. And I think they said, you know what? We can turn this into a sport. And, Dana White has more money than he knows what to do with. And he's always trying to start something new. There was Zuffa Boxing that was supposed to launch, 6 months later, and it's been like 5 years since then. And he's always looking to make a buck and start another business because he just has so much money. And, he's not really in the middle of his life, but it's basically Dana White on a midlife crisis trying to start something that he thinks he can make some money off of. And I've seen people talk about it who've watched other slap fight promotions, because this isn't the first. And from what I understand, I have not watched full episodes of Power Slap, but the rules are not being enforced for the safety of the quote-unquote fighters, okay? There's supposed to be no clubbing, which means you can't lead basically with your palm. It has to be with, the kind of like the second half of your hand down to your fingertips. And apparently that rule's not being really enforced on Dana White's power slap, as well as you're not allowed to step into the slap. And apparently also that's not really being abided by in power slap, which is massively detrimental to the quote unquote slap fighters. I hate to even call them fighters. They're slapping each other, not fighters. But a lot of people are criticizing the UFC and they are saying, these guys are taking CTE. These guys are taking brain damage. This shouldn't be on the air. And while I do believe that's partially true, and this is one of those things that's kind of tricky because I do agree that these guys are taking brain damage and they're taking CTE, but I'm not going to sit here as a fan of MMA, okay? Every Saturday night, we turn on the fights. We witness brain damage being distributed to fighters, okay? And I'm not going to sit here and clutch my pearls for willing participants willing to go out there and slap each other. I do think they should have some rules in place to help, mitigate some of those factors. I don't know. I'm not an expert on slap fighting. I've already talked about the two things that I've seen somebody else discuss in terms of safety of the slap fighters. But I'm not going to sit here. That's not going to be my reason that I think this is a massive black eye on the sport. I think it's partial reason, but I think there's more to it than that. But it is partially true, but that's not the biggest deal when it comes to the UFC, Dana White's the president of the UFC, and promoting of slap fighting. I think the real part that makes slap fighting a real slap in the face to the MMA community is the synchronization of the UFC as a promotion and the slap fight league. They are basically now working hand in hand. I follow the UFC on Instagram. I follow the UFC on Twitter, and now I'm seeing nonstop power slap advertisements. You turn on a UFC broadcast and you're seeing nonstop Dana White's power slap advertisements. And I really do believe that it delegitimizes the sport. The UFC has fought for a long time. They used to call it human cockfighting. And they fought for a long time to kind of say, look, this is a legitimate sport. These guys are skilled. These guys are going out there to compete against each other. And now you have a fact that you're latching on this power slap league to the UFC. I really do think it's an embarrassment and it's delegitimizing the sport. And it's taking it back to a time where people are like, okay, this is a gimmick. We're watching men fight in a cage. We're watching men slap each other across the face and women. And we're just looking for these viral KOs. We're looking for, there was a clip going around of some woman getting slapped. She had a mohawk and then all of a sudden she started doing a somersault. And it just makes the UFC look bad in general. And I think if they wanted to do this power slap, even if they want to attach Dana White's name to it, because obviously it's his business opportunity, it's his business move, stop walking it hand in hand with the UFC. I do not want to see power slap Instagram post when I'm following the UFC. If I wanted to see that, I'd follow power slap. But I think the success of power slap in Dana White's eyes and in the other people who are investing in this, they look at it as predicated on having the promotional push of the UFC. And I really do, and I've talked about this on some streams before, I really do believe power slap in general, along with some other things, is just a massive insult on the MMA community's intelligence. I mean, look what they try to constantly shove down our throats. What is it? It's power slap. It's MMA NFTs. I mean, seriously, that's how lowly they think of the consumer base of the UFC. They say, oh, we want to give these guys, we want to give these young men who are watching, MMA, we want to show them power slap. They're going to love it. We want to sell them MMA NFTs that aren't worth nothing. And that's what they think. And they think if this is disconnected from the UFC as a whole, they think it won't be successful. And that's why they're latching so hard onto the UFC. And I think it's particularly embarrassing. You have the Nevada Athletic Commission, the same refs that ref MMA, the same judges, I believe, that judge MMA. You have them sanctioning this. If Dana White and the UFC was not attached to this, I don't believe they would sanction it. They won't sanction bare knuckle boxing, but they'll sanction this. And, the fact that you got guys like Jason Herzog and Herb Dean standing there ready to, wave it off like it's an MMA fight. Like this is just ridiculous. This is atrocious, and it should be individual of the UFC. We should not see it lumped into the same category as the UFC. It's an embarrassment. And let me say this, and I know kind of, you could consider me with an MMA YouTube channel, you consider me MMA, media per se, but I don't really consider myself as that. I consider myself as kind of, a fan covering MMA from an independent standpoint, but I understand somebody's going to comment down below and saying, you're doing the same thing kind of with this video. But if you're in the legitimate MMA media landscape, you work for MMA Fighting, MMA Junkie, ESPN, so on and so forth. I'm sure there's plenty of websites I can name. And you're covering Dana White's Power Slap as a legitimate sport, you should be ashamed of yourself. And the reason they are doing this, a lot of them are doing it, is because they are lapdogs to Dana White. Dana White owns a lot of the MMA media. So basically, they do what he wants. They do what Dana White wants. If you guys ever watched a press conference and you wonder, well, why isn't Dana White being asked any tough questions? It's because Dana White essentially filters out the MMA media that can be there. If you ask him tough questions, he'll ban you from events. And essentially, he filters it out to the only people who are there are the people that he wants there. And if there's any legitimate MMA media member that is covering Power Slap, whether it be Power Slap interviews, whether it be, going to the Power Slap events, I'm not even sure if they're live or not. You need to shame them online. You need to tell them this is not what I want. Because I feel like the MMA media has become so desperate for clicks and so desperate for some type of coverage, they will literally cover anything. And because so many of them rely on their jobs by being a lapdog of Dana White, i.e. Brett Okamoto, i.e. Kevin Iole. There's plenty of other ones. I'm not going to sit here and name them all. But they will do that and they will cover this. And unless us as fans show them some type of backlash and refuse to click on these articles, refuse to watch these videos, there's no repercussions for it. And they need to have repercussions. We should let them know they should be ashamed of themselves. And they really should be. You're supposed to be covering MMA. You're covering a sport where two men are slapping each other, holding their hands behind their back. You're an embarrassment to the MMA community. You're an embarrassment of a man. If you are an MMA media member, you are being paid to cover the sport and you are covering slap fighting. Now, what can we do about this? Because, and this is why I struggled to make this video. I've been debating about making this video for a couple weeks. But what can we as fans do about Power Slap if we do not want it to succeed? We need to stop talking about it. And I know I'm breaking that rule right in this video, but I really do believe it's hurting the UFC. I do believe it's pissing off a lot of fans, seeing this shit in our feeds when we're just trying to follow the UFC, see fight announcements, and just watch the sport covered and see any of the latest announcements. Where's the UFC going to? What's going on? What's the fight announcements? Is there injuries, this or that? And instead, we're being forced to watch Power Slap advertisements. And, this is probably going to be my only video on Power Slap, depending on if there's something massive that comes out in terms of it, because I've always been, a person who, if I don't support something, I don't talk about it, because I don't want to give it any airtime, even on such a small channel as mine. And I think if you guys hate Power Slap, if you want Power Slap to go away, don't click on the articles. Don't click on the videos. Don't talk about it. Don't even hate watch it, because there's some people out there hate watching it. You will never see me tune into TBS. TBS should be ashamed of themselves. Okay? They should be ashamed of themselves. And that's the best we can do. Ignore it until it goes away, essentially. And to be honest, I don't think this is going to last long. I think this is a midlife crisis for Dana White at 53 years old. I think he's just got too much money. He doesn't know what to do with it. And he's invested in this. He's saying, oh, I saw a video. It had 10 million views on YouTube, of two guys slapping each other. Let's make an entire promotion out of it. And we'll have Jason Herzog run around and wave his hands over the top of his head when a guy gets brutally KO'd with a palm, not an actual slap. And, we'll get Nevada. And the reason Nevada's even sanctioning this is because Nevada, works hand in hand with the UFC. The UFC is responsible for a lot of revenue that comes to the Nevada State Athletic Commission. So that's why they are sanctioning this. And I believe the best we can do, don't hate watch it, don't talk about it, and just don't click on anything regarding Power Slap. And any MMA media covering it, let them know that they should be embarrassed of themselves. But let me know what you guys think about all this down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.